Okay, let's dive right into this fascinating journey of how completely dead sci-fi properties are somehow brought back to life. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tracking a truly wild phenomenon in the entertainment industry. Look, we all know nostalgia absolutely rules the box office right now, right? But the actual journey a dormant property takes to get back onto the big screen, well, it's rarely a straight line. Honestly, it's a grueling, incredibly unpredictable life cycle.
So here is our roadmap for today's explainer as we track this Hollywood reboot ecosystem. First up, resurrecting cult sci-fi. Then we'll look at the untouchable box office bomb, followed by returning to the classics. After that, we'll break down the Tron era scandal. And finally, we'll ask the big question, is nostalgia worth the risk? All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, resurrecting cult sci-fi. The absolutely crucial thing to understand here is that bringing a cult classic back isn't just about someone in a suit greenlighting a script. It's this massive, multi-phased machine. The journey from just a piece of nostalgic IP to a modern blockbuster is a wildly volatile life cycle, and it often spans literally decades. It's essentially an endurance test of funding, navigating crazy fan expectations, and surviving brutal studio politics.
Which brings us to Section 2. The untouchable box office bomb. Now, what's incredibly interesting here is the stark contrast between the nostalgic love for an original source material and the absolute disdain for a terrible theatrical release. Take L. Ron Hubbard's 1982 pulp novel, for example. You know, some diehard sci-fi fans still genuinely praise the book's core concept as this thrilling mix of Planet of the Apes meets Predator. Sounds cool, right? But then there's the 2000 John Travolta film adaptation. It was a complete and utter disaster. Built on a $44 million budget, it became a massive box office bomb and famously swept up 8 Razzie Awards, including Worst Picture of the Decade. Yikes.
So you might be wondering, why hasn't anyone tried rebooting it to capture that original pulp appeal? Well, Reddit user Lyra_the_star_jockey pretty much hits the nail on the head here, saying the Scientologist church owns the rights to Battlefield Earth. So no, a big-budget remake won't get made, and if one did, you shouldn't want it to do well. That toxic critical legacy from the first movie, combined with the highly controversial ownership of the rights, makes this specific property completely untouchable for Hollywood studios. It's pretty much stuck forever in the pipe dream phase.
Moving right along to Section 3, returning to the classics. Let's talk about some properties that actually do survive the speculation and enter the development grind. Just look at the recent news around the 45-year-old Kurt Russell classic, Escape from New York. Now, the 1981 original, directed by John Carpenter, was incredibly efficient. It pulled in $25 million on a tiny $6 million budget. Fast forward to today, and Studio Canal, along with the picture company, just officially confirmed a new reimagining at CinemaCon 2026. What's wild is that this new take actually replaces a totally different 2022 attempt by the directing duo Radio Silence. It just goes to show you, true cult classics never really die in Hollywood, but man, they definitely stumble through years of false starts and shifting creative teams. And this next example brilliantly illustrates the sheer willpower it takes to revive an IP once it is actually in the pipeline. We are tracking Vin Diesel's agonizingly slow 11-year journey just to get the 4th installment, Riddick, Furya, in front of cameras. Get this. Back in 2013, director David Twohy starts writing the script. It takes 6 full years before Vin Diesel even receives the finished draft in 2019. And it wasn't until August 2024 that filming finally kicked off. I mean, that is just a staggering timeline for a sequel.
So why exactly does it take so long? Well, just listen to what Vin Diesel himself said about the process. He noted, "I'm not going to be able to do Riddick at the same pace as Fast and Furious. It's just too dark." And honestly, that quote tells you everything you need to know. These sci-fi passion projects, they just lack the fast-tracked, guaranteed studio momentum of your typical mainstream blockbusters. The people involved literally have to will them into existence, often over the course of decades. Let's shift gears into Section 4, the Tron era scandal. Now we're looking at the final, often brutal phase of the life cycle, the harsh theatrical reality. And Tron Heirs is our prime example. The ambition for the sequel, which, by the way, was in development for 15 years, was absolutely massive. Released in October 2025 and directed by Joachim Ronning, it boasted a seriously star-studded cast, featuring Jared Leto, Greta Lee, and yes, the grand return of Jeff Bridges. Even better,
They gave the whole film this incredibly edgy, industrial identity by bringing in Nine Inch Nails to compose the score. Clearly, Disney was betting heavily on a very gritty, stylized nostalgia play. But that level of ambition comes with a terrifying price tag. We're talking an estimated production budget of between $180 and $220 million. And the spending didn't stop there. Disney reportedly poured an additional $102.5 million strictly into advertising. They blanketed everything from Comic-Con to theme park overlays, doing everything in their power just to get audiences back to the grid. Unfortunately, all that spending basically built toward a complete financial disaster. Against that massive maximum budget of $220 million, the worldwide box office gross was a bleak $142.2 million. The film severely underperformed in theaters. By the time you factor in the marketing costs and the cuts the movie theaters take, it reportedly lost the studio over $132 million. Let's not sugarcoat it, it was a categorical theatrical bomb. But here is the crazy, ironic twist of the modern Hollywood life cycle: the streaming salvation. Seriously, once Tron escaped the theater and actually hit living rooms, it became an instant global phenomenon. It shot straight to #1 worldwide on Disney+, beating out massive titles like Avatar. Nielsen ratings showed it pulled in a whopping 258 million viewing minutes in a single week in January 2026. Plus, it absolutely dominated the Fandango at Home digital sales charts. So it turns out the audience definitely existed, they just flat out refused to buy a movie ticket. Finally, that brings us to Section 5. Is nostalgia worth the risk? We have tracked this entire wild life cycle today, from the impossible, sort of toxic dreams of properties like Battlefield Earth, to the grueling 11-year endurance tests of passion projects like Riddick, all the way to the extreme streaming highs and box office lows of Tron Ares. So I want to conclude this explainer by leaving you with a rather provocative question. Would you prefer your favorite dead sci-fi franchises to stay buried as perfect nostalgic memories? Or are you willing to risk them becoming the next $200 million box office gamble? Look, Hollywood's nostalgia machine is never going to stop churning, but as we've clearly seen today, resurrecting the past is a dangerously expensive game. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you in the next explainer as we continue to break down the most fascinating trends out there.